what would you like your legacy to be?
Legacy, I don't care. For me, that's too close to ego. I think about footprint, which is, do I have a good footprint? Do I look after people? Do I carry myself lightly? I think it's really just about being a creator, make things with the people I want to make them with, and continue doing that, and just being happy whilst I did that.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniella Ekundayo. I am the founder of In the Writer's Mind and your host of The Stars Behind the Stars. This series is your go-to series for learning about the visionaries working behind the scenes in the entertainment industry. I created this series as a love letter to the entertainment industry, but it's also your go-to guide for success. You can learn how the visionaries did it, so you can do it too. I'm joined here with Simon Dixon, who is the co-founder of the incredible design and branding agency, DixonBaxi. Now, if you haven't heard of DixonBaxi, well, I'm going to tell you a bit about it. DixonBaxi is one of the most incredible design and branding agencies in the world. They have a global reputation. They have worked with the likes of Netflix, ITV, Hulu, Channel 4, gaming platforms like Roblox. They've even worked with music venues like Coco. Simon doesn't just do it on his own, he also works with Aporva Baxi, who is the co-founder of DixonBaxi. And Simon has worked with some of the most iconic brands, helping them to tell their stories, helping them to brand and connect with audiences. Thank you, Simon, for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me. What a nice intro. That's it. We should cut there, and I'll just put that. I'll send that to my mum. She'll be super happy. Yeah,
I was like, I need to fit everything in because there's just so much to say.
Yeah, and we have a team of 50 people, of course, who actually the actual stars. They're the ones who create the work, and my job is just to create the space for them to do that. Really.
I love that. And, you know, one of the things that I really appreciate about your personality, and this comes across on your LinkedIn as well, which is how you praise everyone you work with. And I'm definitely going to get into that in this interview as well. But first, I wanted to start with, so I was doing a little bit of digging. I love to do like my journalism digging. Oh, dear. I feel like you're wondering what I'm going to say. Yeah. You started a design agency, if I'm correct. In 1990, straight out of college.
Yeah, good knowledge.
I was like, that is a ballsy move. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how you started that, and also just where your mindset was at that time?
Yeah, I suppose the thing to say is I was probably so stupid I didn't realise that you shouldn't start an agency when you're 19. But I went to a provincial college, so I didn't go to university, and I did a vocational course in graphic design. So what was called print design then. So this predates a lot of the digital technologies we use. And myself and two friends on the course just started to make things. We did rave flyers, we did little bits of design posters, quite modest work. But we felt that was an interesting introduction to our industry because we were anxious to get going, basically. And we didn't feel we were learning fast enough on the course. So we just thought, well, why don't we start an agency? And what we did was we traded design work with a record shop, and they gave us space in the back of it for our studio. We did that for a few years. And what it meant was we started through practice. So we made things. And what was cool was the work, in a sense, certainly for the music industry, was relatively disposable because it was high churn, it was really fast. Different events every week, every night, every month. So we could make things and test the assumptions about our creativity, show it, instantly people would react to it, good and bad. And you'd know really quickly from feedback whether that particular piece of design someone resonated with or didn't. So it was a great introduction to the industry. And I've always been a bit of a self-starter. I didn't go to school. So I got into the world in a very atypical way. And I've always learnt by doing, and that has stayed with me ever since.
I love that. And even you mentioning about not going to school as well, because I feel like people watching this who may not have that experience of going to school, seeing someone like you and how much you've accomplished and how big of a name DixonBaxi has become in the entertainment industry, working with so many brands, they can see that actually they can do it too. And that's one of the reasons why I started this series. Going back to that kind of like your earlier years, can you take us to the very beginning, as far as you remember, where your love for design and branding started and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, I think I was always a visual person. So I always liked the look and the feel of things. And my father was a journalist and a photographer. So the house was very artistic, quite bohemian, really. My mum's a very creative person, but more through personality and the way she kind of curates friendships and is very open and warm as a person. So it was a very active house in terms of lots of different types of people from lots of different backgrounds, a lot of music. And what I found was I was looking at the record covers. In those days, it was vinyl, 12-inch vinyl albums. And each of them was different and they were relevant to the music and had liner notes and they talked about the artists and the ideas behind the albums. But I suddenly realized somebody was creating them. There was a name on it that said someone's name. So I kind of was really intrigued about how do you get to make that? So that's what I did. I started practicing. I also drew comics. So I self-published comics when I was very young, when I was like 14, 15. And we used to sell them for a little bit of money so I could buy science fiction comics.
Oh.
So we did that for a bit. And then we just got into, like I said, doing this kind of flyer work for the music industry. Then I started doing 12 inches and album covers for actual artists. So particularly in trance and techno and kind of ambient music. And this was in the very early 90s when that went absolutely crazy. It was a really huge scene. So it meant that I was working in, York, where I'm from, Leeds, Derby, Nottingham, Sheffield, really interesting cities, and then ultimately London. So we did the first agency for about 3 years, didn't make any money, had to do lots of other work in order to pay our rent and eat our food. And then I joined another group of people who very rapidly after that opened a studio in London. So I went to London when I was 24 to open a studio with somebody. And that's where I met Aporva, my business partner. He was the first person that we employed in that studio.
Wow.
And the story goes actually is we'd employed somebody else. And my friend said, "Oh, you should meet this guy, Aporva." So I met him one night and we talked for about 3 or 4 hours about films and music and life. And the following day, I rang the person that we hired and said, "I'm sorry, I made a mistake."
Wow.
And hired Aporva instead, which was by far the best decision I've made in my life, apart from marrying my wife. And then 2 years later, we went to open a studio in New York. We did it again. And then 2 years later, we went to open a studio in San Francisco. So from 24 to about 29, I opened 3 studios with some other people. And I always say I went from boy to man. That's when I kind of grew up and I learned about the world. I traveled, had to kind of throw myself out there. And that's really how I got in the game. It was just self-initiated, taking the risk to try something. I didn't really know any better. And no one said I should not do it, which is what I think is important. If you haven't a thing you want to do, it's important to try and do that thing, because I don't want to live with any regret that I didn't try something.
That's a really, really great answer. I love the way you broke down your career trajectory. And as you were talking, I just started thinking about a concept. I love when ideas, platforms, and movements are formed as an answer to something that people have overlooked. And when I think about that concept, I think about this agency. I don't know if you've heard of it, called Monopo. So they're actually a creative agency that was born in Japan, but they now have offices in Paris and New York and here. And the agency actually started by 2 bass players who wanted to basically support their friends. And then they started marketing their friends' music and music collectives, and then went on to event production and so forth, and now working with all these different brands. And that was born as an answer to something. I also think about Dapper Dan, who's one of the really prominent Black fashion designers, and how he created Logomania as an answer to luxury brands not really focusing on hip hop and rappers, and seeing that the consumers of hip hop are also people that they can market to. And I was just thinking about how so many great ideas and people's greatest work can be formed as an answer to something. And that got me thinking about DixonBaxi, and it got me thinking about how you and Aporva started your design agency. And I read that you actually came up with 2 lists of things that you will and won't do.
Yeah, we did.
And the things on those lists,
very simple people.
Yeah. The things on those lists, on the won't side, it was won't work for money. And then on the will side,
money.
Yeah, won't work just for money.
Definitely work
We
for
definitely
money.
need some money.
Yeah.
But then it was even things like follow, you won't follow, you won't cheat.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah.
On the will side, it's define your own destiny.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
These kind of really great, I would say, ethical things to stand by as founders. And for me, it's quite rare to see business owners have come in with a mindset of this is what we will and won't do, and this is what we're going to stick to and not compromise on. I just wanted to know, like, what are the reasonings and motivations behind that list, and how do you both ensure that you stick to it without being too critical of yourselves?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's there's a number of things I think in that. The first of which is you start out as a creator. So I started out as a creator who was a designer who wanted, communications basically. Mm-hmm. And what you were saying earlier, I think is really interesting, which is great design, great art, it's tribal. It comes from communities, it's for communities. So whenever I think about designing systems or whenever we're creating something for large audiences, I think it's a very tribal, community-based thing. We design things for tens of hundreds of millions of people, sometimes billions of people, but they all care about something as a group of people as well as individuals. But also personally, you're a creator. So you're bringing yourself to the table and you only learn about business as a secondary thing to being a creator. I didn't go into design to be a businessman. I went into design to express myself. And I like the power of professional creativity to move people, connect people, speak to audiences that are underserved. And I think it's really important because the world is a really big place and there's not enough celebration of difference. There's not enough celebration of the fact there's lots of different ways of expressing yourself and being. And music, fashion, and the tribes and the communities that come off that, they're all distinct. So if you're into hip hop, you have a very different lived experience to if you're into techno music. But the power of that for your life, what it means to you, how it defines you, how it defines your relationships, that's the same. So I think it speaks to a kind of deep creative truth where people want to be part of something. And it's a way of expressing yourself and reflecting yourself.
That was such a beautiful
I didn't answer the actual question.
But that was a great
Sorry,
answer, though.
I missed the list off. But the first phase of what you said, I thought was fascinating. The list part of it was, I've always said this thing, which is, if you're making something, it's good to be centered around something more truthful to you. And the world changes a lot. People tell you a lot of things. There's a lot of noise and chaos. So I think if you have principles and you have a value set, they're more eternal. So the things that were on the list, which is not about following, it was challenging us to be better at our job, to be more inventive, not to deal with the of life. You know, you can only control what you can control. And if you only work for money, then that determines what you are. Whereas if you get really good at what you do, you serve people well, you'll get paid well. But I'd rather work for the work because I'm fulfilled by the work. The money part of it just means I can, live my life. I do like money, of course.
You like disclaimer, look. We like
it's I'm not adverse to earning well,
Something as well that I liked that you put on the will side was like design for everyone and design everywhere. Yeah. And I love that. I think those are such important ethics to have at the center of your company. I also asked you to bring a sentimental item with you. You have brought two. Can you talk about what you've brought?
Yeah, of course. The first of which is a set of Polaroids, which was probably the second major project we did as DixonBaxi when we founded the company. It's a project we did for MTV. So it has sentimental value to me because there's two reasons. The first of which, we filmed it live action. At the time, we were doing a lot of design and being given permission to shoot live action, invent characters and make something which was quite atypical for MTV, was quite an unusual project. So they took a creative risk with us, which is really good. But throughout my career, I've worked with MTV a lot on and off in different ways. So when we first went to London, MTV was one of our first clients. When we went to Manhattan, MTV was one of our first clients. When we started DixonBaxi, many years later, they're one of our first clients. And then recently we did the VMAs with them for the 40th anniversary. So that means I've worked with MTV on and off for 30 years. And there's something really interesting about how they've changed culturally, their relevance, how you just kind of cross over with people. Obviously, some people I know and some people I don't from those periods. But it was really, really rewarding. And it just represents, I suppose, that eternal thing of bringing yourself forward as a creator, doing something new and making it relevant now, even if you've done something in the past. Whatever you make now needs to work today as opposed to rest on something from tomorrow. And then the second thing is an AC Milan football jersey, which is a very iconic Italian football club. And when I was a young man, when I was 18, 19, I used to watch Italian football on TV and I used to support AC Milan. And then many years later, they emailed and asked if we'd like to rebrand them. And we're like, yeah, of course we would. It'd be amazing. And the jersey is actually a gift they gave to us after the project and has the company name on the back. Wow. So it represents the relationship with the client, because we had a very fast turnaround project. It was a very short-term project, but it was very highly bonded. So the people we worked with in Milan, we spent time with them, we got to know them, became friends with them. That's a really special relationship. And for me, when I'm working with clients, I won't be friends with all of them, but I see it as a kind of mutual respect thing, which is if you have a shared ambition, you can create something amazing.
I love how much you value the relationship that you have with clients, and it's not just a thing where it's like that project and that's it. It's actually a long-term thing that you're building. It kind of makes me think of journalism, because I have a very like journalistic brain because I studied journalism, and I love that like your dad as well has a background in journalism too. But there's obviously this idea of parachute journalism where journalists will go into communities, do the story, and then just go, and then the local journalists that have been covering that story for all that time, it takes away from their work. So when you were speaking, I just thought of that concept too. Thank you so much for sharing the the long-term relationship you have with MTV. Like the fact that you've been working with them for 30 years is absolutely incredible. And something I want to get onto later on in our conversation is just how you sustain those relationships with clients too. Something that I feel like is a really important topic now is just the kind of idea of being original and being authentic. And I think it's something that some brands struggle to because there's so much competition out there. How do you, as an agency owner, how do you ensure that DixonBaxi is original, is authentic? And also, what can you say to brands who are struggling to have to maintain that authenticity and originality?
Yeah, so they come from two different sources. So when you think about us as a creative entity, it's about our desire to be part of the change. Because whatever happens, culturally, behavioural, attitudinal changes happen, technology changes happen. So if you're not part of that change, culture will outrun you. So we have a very high tolerance for taking creative risks. We want our studio to be a safe space where people could try things, make mistakes, because if you're going to create something amazing, you have to make bad work and then good work, then great work, then exceptional work. So you have to get used to the period where it's uncertain. Maybe it's not working, but if every time you create something, it's easy and you feel like you're on top of it, then you're maybe not pushing far enough. So it's that idea of going too far and being uncomfortable and then coming back to the place that's right. So that's a kind of person-based thing, which is you have to feel comfortable doing that and not exposed and raw. So we try and create a safe space to do that. When you think about a brand, I think it's not about originality, it's about distinction and authenticity or relevance even, because true originality is very hard to create. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, but a lot of brands find it very difficult to be distinct. And I don't mean different, I mean something which is around their campfire, something that's a meaningful idea that is true to what they do and true for the people that they serve and the world around that, as opposed to looking out and going, well, everyone else is doing this, we should do that. And what that does is create a sea of sameness. And you could feel that, or it creates what you were talking about earlier, which is it's a cultural or creative disconnect, which is let's target this audience because we might make money from them. Everybody can see that coming a mile away. But if you authentically show up in a way and you let that community, let the audience in and be part of that, and they have a share of voice and it's an interaction, then it's much better because it's for everybody. And I think whenever you're creating for mass or scale for a lot of people, it's not just about including everybody, but it's everybody being represented in where they have share of voice. So they're part of the process. So a lot of our creative phase when we're working with brands is there's a lot of active listening. We speak to the community. So if it's AC Milan, we meet the fans, we go to Italy. We did a project for a fintech business in the Philippines recently. We speak to the audience and you speak to people and figure out why they need the thing. And then you decide how to make it interesting and unique and different for them. And if you do that, then you're doing both things, I think.
Oh yeah, that's a really, really great answer. And I just love how you spoke there about the value of social listening and the value of actually going into communities. One of the things that really drew me to you as an individual is just the way you speak about diversity, the way you speak about representation. I'm going to say it very freely, but it's quite rare for a white man who's a founder of a creative agency.
I'm not white, am I? Yeah.
to have that, to be so bold about that. And I remember when I first discovered your LinkedIn page, one of the things that really drew me to you is just like how you prioritize that within your agency. So many people who look like me go into creative agencies where we are the one of or the only. Being in that environment is tough.
What you don't want is tokenism, because that doesn't work for anybody. You need it to be something that is real and true and representative of all types of people.
Yeah.
And that's not just ethnicity, it's different cultural background, social mobility, different ways of identifying and seeing the world. Initially, when I was younger, I was very nervous about talking about this subject because I am a white man. I wear glasses. I grew up in a council house, so I came from a background which wasn't particularly wealthy, but obviously I have great privilege and status relative to other people because of my background. So I was always very anxious about talking about it as a subject. But what I figured was the only way that the industry was going to change was if you do it from a grassroots level.
Yeah.
So we started an intern academy way over a decade ago now, long time ago, where we said we'll try and get as many different people into the industry as possible and support them, and then either develop them through our agency or pass them on to somebody else, and hopefully give people a sense that there's space for everybody to be creative in our industry in some way. And it's not just designers and camera people, it's writers and technicians and strategists and lots of different types of people. And I think it's really important to celebrate difference. It's really important to give people share of voice. And I think the only way of doing it is to over-index and just to look at it and say, this is not working. People are not getting access. So how do we change that? So we just decided to give that a go. And over time, I've grown as a person. I think I've become a better man from that. I've learned from people. I've improved it in my job. And I think that's the power of it. It's reciprocal. You gain from that process.
I love the way you broke that down. I think it's really important for people to hear your take on this as well. And like, as I was saying, I just love that you actually prioritize diversity within your agency, but also access, and that you actually devote so much of your time to speaking about these topics on LinkedIn. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted you to be here and actually say it to our audience.
I started doing that, I was very anxious because I thought, well, I could easily get shot down because someone's going to like, dude, you're a white guy who runs an agency. Why should you be talking about this? But I thought, well, everybody's complicit, aren't they? Everybody's got to be part of it. And everybody's got to be honest about the situation. Like if you tried, at the point of entry, it's about 60-40 female, male identifying in the industry, in our version of the design industry. But if you go to creative director, it's between 14 and 18% is female. So that's a huge difference. If you try and change the industry at creative director level, you can. There's an access issue. And I think it's changed radically over the last 15, 20 years. I think I see much more independent thought, different communities expressing themselves different ways. These types of things where people share ideas about what happens behind the scenes, I think are incredibly important because a lot of people don't realize these jobs exist. And what you're doing is really powerful because you're showing that there's different ways of being creative. And I'm sure the stories are all also equally rich because not everybody has a kind of linear way into the industry. You have quite wiggly and squiggly ways of doing things and you have to make mistakes and sometimes it's really difficult. And I think that's a reality of being a creative person. But I think, we should all do whatever we should do to allow as many people as possible to be able to do what they do.
And just thinking about your career as a whole, does a challenge come to mind that you've had to overcome? It can be recent, it can be something even like from like 30 years ago. But could you talk about that and also just how you've been able to overcome that obstacle as a founder?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My mind doesn't actually work like that. So I see that on any given day, you need to make more good decisions than bad ones. But we will all make bad decisions. We'll all, I'm sure I've been horribly flawed in my career. I've made all sorts of stupid mistakes. But what I think about is I'm an aggregation of everything that got me to here as I'm sat now. And as I sit here with you, I'm fulfilled. So I believe that everything I did allowed me to take all of that experience, all the things I've learned, all the collaborations and things I have, and then do something with it. And that's how I see it. So for that time I froze on stage at a conference and that time that I got told off by a client because I'd spelt something wrong, or I was as a bad person in an interview, or whatever the thing you do, those mistakes you make, they're just part of the human condition of learning, and we're all flawed people. So I try not to carry the baggage of the not so good side, and I try to take that and learn from it. But in any given moment, I think I have all of these things in my hand. What can I do with them? And can I do something positive and optimistic? And can I do that with people I want to be with? And can I do that in a way that will be useful and relevant and additive? And then I'd have to worry about the rest of it.
It's a powerful, very powerful message. I want to dive into some of the monumental work that DixonBaxi has done, starting with your work with MTV, but last year, the VMA Awards. Can you talk about that campaign and what it was like to bring the chrome element of the Moon Man into the whole aspect of the campaign? What research did you have to do into understanding the legacy of the VMAs? Can you just take us a little bit into your mind, DixonBaxi's mind, and what you're trying to create?
If you think about it, the VMAs are kind of a tentpole cultural thing. So as a celebration of music and the culture around that, it was the 40th anniversary, which is a really profound thing. It's a long time, 4 decades of being at the forefront of where music meets culture. So they wanted to celebrate in grand style, which is the way they do things. And MTV is always very collaborative as a company. Obviously, most people in that company are creators themselves. They understand how creativity and communication works. So it was really about finding a vibe, really. It was about finding the energy, because it's an intense burst of social energy, really. That's what it's about. And they wanted something that was highly visceral, highly instantaneous visually, because there was going to be a huge campaign on places like Times Square in Manhattan. It has to project out of the stage and the actual kind of live performance, but it has to drive the social engine. That's where it really meets the world. So we just did a bunch of exercising, just testing different things. And the moon person is a really iconic thing. It's like the Oscar or the Grammy. It's an iconic thing in its own right. But we just fancied the idea of doing something which was just, instead of 10, let's get it to like 12 in terms of the energy level. So we just did quite a lot of testing on the kind of finish, the feel. But what we wanted was just something that instantly said, this is high energy, high celebration, no fuss. It's just, life is great, music matters, let's just have some fun. And that was really what it was about.
And when it came to launching the campaign, did you have to test it with like Gen Z audiences to see how it worked well with younger audiences? Yeah,
there's a kind of yes or no to that question. I'm not a massive fan of putting people into demographics like Gen Z, because in my experience, people don't work like that. There's kind of younger versus more experienced people. There's people in certain situations and locations. And if you treat people as a homogenized mass, they become data. It's not humanized.
That's true.
And I find what happens is, if you make eye-bleedingly exciting work, people of lots of different ages like it. Of course, there are differences between younger and more experienced people. But if you think about Gen Z, it's like hundreds of millions of people. But there's lots of behavioral and cultural and kind of relevance things that are inside that. That if you make work which is really high energy, really visceral, it represents the music, it represents the celebration, that should touch lots of different people. But what it comes down to is, where is Gen Z? How you show up for them? What technologies and platforms are they using? And how do you flow through to them? So the system that you deliver it can make it tactically really specific to them. But the engine that drives the creativity can be for everybody. Because if you're Katy Perry, she'll have her audience as it grows. And then if you're Dua Lipa, she'll have her audience. That's fine. But when you think about music as a celebratory thing for all of MTV, that should speak to everybody.
I love the breakdown. I also loved how you actually challenged me on Gen Z. And to be honest, I don't think
I like Gen Z,
but yeah.
I'm Gen X, so we're the ones who everything else.
For a brand as big as MTV, the content, the campaign has to appeal to everyone. And I feel like even with younger audiences, there's so many young people that love the 90s era, that love the funk era, that love so many different
And I don't know people walk down the street going, I'm Gen Z, so I want things to be like this. They walk down the street going, I want to eat. I'd like to, download something. I like to watch something. I like to share something. I'd like to talk to somebody. I'd like to hang out. That's what people do. Their lived experience is moments of time where they're defined by the choices they make with the brands and the content and the things that they engage with. And when it gets to music, that's super hardwired into who you are.
That's so true.
So I think you just have to be careful not to make people data and not turn them into ideas, because they're people. So whenever we're working at scale, we still want to be fluent in those people and humanize it so that we're still talking to people, because I think we share a lot more than we think we do. You and I come from very different backgrounds, but there'll be certain things that we're interested in that we share on a common human level, which the drivers of great creativity.
I love how you spoke about not making people data, because I feel like that's such an important topic in marketing, especially as a marketeer. Like in companies that I've worked for, it's like, oh, what does the data say? What does this say? But then I'm like, okay, I see what the data is saying, but social listening and reading the comments is actually telling me something slightly different, or that we should try this and we should try that. So I think there has to be a balance between data, but also seeing audiences as humans and not just like consumers.
Yeah, it's a combination of insight and intuition, really. So if you're a creative person who works professionally, you build up knowledge of how to communicate to people and how to express yourself and how to make things that matter to people. And data is only as good as the insight you take from that and how it translates into that work. Because everyone has the same data, but a lot of people's work's crap. And a lot of work in the world is really homogenized and grey and goopy. And that's not much fun. So if you're going to use data, turn it into something that means something to people.
And I also want to talk about the fact that you've worked with some of the biggest film, TV, and media and streaming service brands as well, including Netflix, Tubi, Channel 4. I could really go on. The list is actually endless. What does it take to work with some of the biggest entertainment brands in the world? And also, obviously, like you've spoken about your long-standing relationship with MTV. How do you maintain clients and keep them as repeat clients and sustain that relationship?
It's about being useful, basically. So there's lots of agencies who make creativity, you know, for that level of client. And as you develop your career, you kind of settle where your talent dictates, your ambition dictates, or the type of work dictates. I've always liked the idea of designing for everyone. I love the idea of designing for someone in Mexico City and New York and Tokyo. I love the idea that design is a democratized thing and it can change the world for the better, and it can connect things and communicate things and emotionally engage people. I love the power of design. So I don't want to shortchange that by only working with one type of person. And plus I learn a lot from talking to different people and traveling the world in different communities. So when you work at scale, it's about making something that can work everywhere and function really well. So design at our level is like an ecosystem. You can hear it, you can touch it, it moves, you interact with it. It flows through a streaming platform, but also through social and marketing. It's in the real world. So what you're trying to do is do a UX journey, which is from the real world to when you want to download something on your phone. And if you make that journey really easy and exciting and delightful for people, but you make whatever design system you create match the brand rather than just match a generic version of it, then it starts to deliver, I think. And streaming platforms, the problem they have is everyone acts the same way. It's just like a bunch of tiles, a bunch of content, and it's just the same. So as soon as you create something that's different, it's differentiated. So you mentioned Tubi, and their whole thing was, rather than being something for everyone, it's everything for someone. So everything for someone. And that's about you or me. And what they wanted to do was serve underserved communities. And what they've done is they've created what's called studios, where they're giving money to different ethnic community creators to make their own content for their own audiences, then show it on the platform. So that's a kind of direct lineage to that idea. And once you start doing those types of things, then I think it starts to be real and relevant and useful and meaningful to people. So that's what we track, is just reality rather than homogenized data.
That was a really great description of how you've worked with these different clients and also how you've sustained the relationship too. Off the back of that, I wanted to ask you a question, which might be quite a loaded question. Okay. In your words, what does it take to become a globally recognized design agency? And what would you say are the keys to success, if there are any?
The desire to do so. So when we started the agency, we never thought of ourselves as a British or London company. We've always seen ourselves as citizens of the world because we like working everywhere. And at any given week, 85% of the work we make is international. It's not all based in the UK. So some of that is a structural thing of just trying to work everywhere. I think the truthful answer is, it's what I said earlier, your drive to make work that connects to a lot of people and your ability to deliver against that is what dictates where you sit in the industry. And I think we've been very fortunate that we make, I think, work is very visceral and emotional and connects to people, but we've got very good at doing that for large audiences. And that's what I think clients value in is that we treat the audience with respect, but that audience is 100 million people or 200 million people or 300 million people. And designing from a mass audience and not dumbing it down and treating them with respect, I think is where we've weaved through. And because we've got good at it, I think it's just leveled us to a place where we're useful. We're good at problem solving because design or branding at this level is really complex. And that complexity can overrun and make things be rounded or not very interesting. And, you know, when you're making a brand at this scale, the client's under a huge amount of pressure because that change is massive. So taking them on a creative journey where they understand the value of the change, you build consensus, you build belief in it, make sure the internal team is listened to so that they're part of that change, and then their business associations are part of that change. Then you reach the audience, then everybody wins. If you just turn up and go, hey, we've got these really cool ideas, we should change everything, that's a shock to the system. It's also disrespectful. So we treat everybody with respect. We treat the client with respect, our team with respect, the people we're designing for, and the system with respect. And we make sure that we listen enough to make sure it works. And I think that's why people use our version of it.
I actually want to go back to some of the work that DixonBaxi has done, especially your work with Coco at the music venue in Camden High Street. Last year, you helped to rebrand and reinvent Coco as they reopened. Can you talk about that campaign, but also what your vision is for DixonBaxi in helping to amplify music and sound?
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice word, the amplify. You're basically serving somebody who is given access to creators to the world. So Coco is one of the great venues, and some of the world's great artists came through there. So you can't cheat that history. You know, they were a venue who was there when it mattered. So artists were given voice. And obviously it lost its way and it was in a difficult period. So the person who rebooted it wanted to go back to that kind of spirit of giving voice and shape to lots of different creators. And I love that idea because that's the basics, isn't it? Which is if you create a venue that somebody can perform, gain an audience, gain notoriety and a reputation, then you're part of that development. They also wanted a system which was much more digital and socially led, so that rather than you just having to experience it in the venue, you could experience it externally, you could watch it back, you could be part of that. They then could connect to the artists' communities and create a nice network of a kind of mass set of different overlapping communities. So we just help them with that idea and system. But it's a beacon of creativity. So the idea was around this idea of a rebel with a cause, which is everybody that goes to that venue has a world view. So the idea was to support that. And then they needed to speak to the people who would be on the ground in the actual venue, but also people who wouldn't be there. So you want that idea to radiate out and be felt, even though it's through a screen. So we wanted to make the idea very clear and visceral. And that's what we did. We created a very simple system which delivered on the venue, the digital aspect of it, and it allowed for a kind of street level and a premium version because it's also a club as well, a members club. So you needed like a premium level to it as well.
And on the topic of reinvention and rebranding, DixonBaxi has launched a new website. Can you talk about the importance of reinvention and rebranding for creators and brands today?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, a website is kind of shop window, isn't it? Now, most of our notoriety comes from our work. People see the work in the real world. And also our social channels like Instagram or my LinkedIn are a way of people deciding if they like the ethos of the company. But we've always believed in content as marketing, rather than marketing for marketing's sake. Most of our content is meant to open up the industry and make it easier to understand what it's like to be a creator. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier in terms of access to the industry. So the new website has some new case studies. It has what's called Essentials, which is our kind of operating system. It's the principles of the business. And that was a book that we created. And also what's called Journeys, which is a 200-page book, which is about different roles within the company, different departments, and it explains the career growth. So those two things we've digitized so we can just share what was something we use for our team to give to people. Then the third season of the DixonBaxi Way, which is our version of talking about the creative condition, how we create, why we create, and how we do that as a team. And then finally Remix, which is, it's like a book which is the kind of the visceral quality of how we make, almost like the behind the scenes. And that's the kind of 450-page book that's been digitized. So all of that sits on DixonBaxi.com.
You talk about the behind the scenes, you talk about the career growth. These are all things that would be inside a company that people outside of the company would have no clue about. So yeah, it's great to have that in a place where everyone can see. So as a final question, I really wanted to go back to the list, you know, and the we will side of the list, particularly the phrase that says define our own destiny.
Yeah.
I love the topic of destiny. I love the topic of legacy. What would you like your legacy to be? And when I say legacy, I am referring to you, but also DixonBaxi as well.
I like to feel like I'm creatively developing, I'm relevant, and I'm engaged with what I'm doing. So that's all that matters to me. And I'm 36 years into my career, so I've been doing it for a very, very long time. But I still have the same drive and enthusiasm for being a creator and being part of creation as I did when I was 19. So I feel highly fulfilled and I feel very energized by that. And it's just an eternal thing. I'll just create as long as people allow me to. Legacy, I don't care. It's like I really am not that. For me, that's too close to ego. So I think about footprint, which is, do I have a good footprint? Do I look after people? Do I carry myself lightly and respectfully with people? Other than that, it's up to other people to decide whether or not they enjoyed a relationship with me or the entity. But I think it's really just about being a creator and making the way I want to make things with the people I want to make them with, and continue doing that and just being happy whilst I did that.
I love the way that you answered that in a way that's authentic to you, and talking about using words like footprint and what you're actually like leaving, as opposed to like legacy as a more heavier word. I find the way people answer that question so interesting, because every single time it's always a different answer, and it's always a new perspective. So thank you so much for sharing yours. And that wraps up our conversation for today. Simon, I just want to say it's been an honor to speak with you, to have you on this series, and I feel like people are really gonna be inspired by what you have said here.
Thank you. Thanks for being such a wonderful host, and thanks for doing this as an exercise, because it's really great for the community. So thank you very much.